In the paper, he outlines a way to define whether a machine can be actually called intelligent. It was only deemed to be human if an interrogator couldn't tell if they were talking to a machine or to another human. And interestingly, Turing actually based this idea on a Victorian parlour game, where two people, a man and a woman, would both try to convince the rest of the party that they were a woman. So they would go into a different room and they would be asked questions, and their answers would be read out by a neutral referee, and then the woman must answer truthfully, and the man would answer in any way he believed to convince the rest of the party that he was really a woman. So Turing turned this idea on his head and said, well, we'll just take a similar idea, and rather than proving femaleness, we'll prove intelligence. And today, this Turing test is the standard that many scientists still attempt to reach through international awards such as the Lomonosov Prize. Turing was also part of a wide group of individuals working in the area of cybernetics and machine intelligence. And he became part of a very influential group called the Ratio Club, which were some early scientists in 1950s Britain that came together to discuss these ideas. As part of this group, he got to know a man called William Brain-Walter, who was a neurologist who was interested in machine intelligence. And he had developed in the 1950s a series of artificial tortoises. And these tortoises would move around a space, they would get around obstacles, they would follow a light, and when they were low on power, they would go back into their hutch. And Turing actually came, this is the Science Museum where I work, but this is it in 1950. 1951, where there was a big exhibition called the Exhibition of Science, which is part of the Festival of Britain. And Turing came here and actually saw the cybernetic tortoise. This is the tortoise that we show in the exhibition, and it's one of the ones that Turing would have seen and was absolutely delighted when he saw it moving around the space, and was very impressed at how they showed such human characteristics. When Turing visited the museum at the same time, he saw, again, one of the early machines, a Ferranti Nimrod computer. And this was one of the first ever game-playing computers. So the engineers who had developed the Ferranti Nimrod machine actually got it to play a game called NIM, which is a very simple logical game. But Turing played against the computer and managed to he managed to win, but at the same time he also managed to break the machine. So he understood the algorithm on the spot, and he got the computer to flash both you've won and you've lost. And then the machine shut itself down in a sulk, and again, Turing was very pleased to see it showing such human characteristics. So the fourth and final area I'd like to talk to you about is the area of morphogenesis. And it's this area where Turing begins to look at the patterns of mathematics, of nature. So Alan Turing was interested in how apparently random patterns followed mathematical rules. For instance, he noticed that the number of spirals in the seed patterns of a sunflower head and of pine cones often conform to a number that appears in the mathematical sequence, the Fibonacci sequence. So as many of you will know, that's the sequence where numbers sum up from the last two. So 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And Turing believed that these numbers could hold crucial insights into the way that plants grow and develop. So in 1948, he moved to Manchester University, which is where you can see him here. And there he worked with a pioneering machine called the Manchester Mark I computer. And he wrote some of the early programs for this machine and the programming manual for the rest of the team. And this was one of the first stored program computers in the world, and it was actually finished before the Pilot-based computer that I showed you before. The Mark I computer gave Turing access to a new level of computational power, and it helped him to explore programming and his ideas around patterns of life in greater depth. So by bringing together the disciplines of maths and biology, Turing developed one of the seminal pieces of work in this field. This slide shows some of his coloured diagrams that he made in connection to his work on morphogenesis. And he in particular was interested in diffusion and reaction equations, which look at how chemicals react and diffuse into each other and cause stronger concentrations in some areas than in others. And they show how apparently random patterns, such as the spots on a cow, are actually created through mathematical rules and essential to the whole field of pattern formation. In 1952, Alan Turing was living in Manchester and his home was burgled, and he told the police that he suspected a man that he had been in a relationship with. Such relationships were against the law in Britain, and Turing was arrested and convicted of gross indecency. And he was given two options at this time. He was told that he could either go to prison, or that he could be given the female hormone, stilbestrol, which you can see here. And Turing opted for the latter. It was during this time of this treatment that Turing undertook this work on morphogenesis. And it seems just too great a coincidence that Turing became so interested in the mathematics of how chemicals react and diffuse at the same time that his own body is undergoing very major changes due to the introduction of the female hormone into his body. So, in 1954, Alan Turing was found dead in his bed. He was aged just 41. The official verdict for his death was suicide, and he was found with cyanide on the stove and an apple beside his bed. And it was believed that he'd eaten the apple to take away the taste of the cyanide. His mother always believed that it was not suicide, that it was merely an accident, and other people who knew him thought this was the case too. Apparently he often had pots on his stove full of chemicals, he would have wires everywhere, he would often be experimenting at home and enjoying himself, and so an accident such as this may easily have happened. But although this is an incredibly tragic story, I hope that I've shown you that Alan Turing was not an awkward loner who works on his own in the way that many great scientists are perceived to be. He was very much part of a network of ideas and of people, and he always shared his work at conferences with his colleagues. He was one mathematician amongst many mathematicians and engineers and logicians who were working in this very new area of computing in the 1950s. At Bletchley Park, he was known by his colleagues as the professor, the prof, because he would often be the person that people would turn to if they had a difficult problem. And although Turing wasn't always easy to work with, he always thought very originally and brought together new ideas and made connections that others would find very hard to find. I'd say he wasn't easy to work with because one of his characteristics was that he would actually chain his cup to his radiator to make sure that nobody would steal it when he wanted to have a cup of tea. So he was quite eccentric in many ways. But his colleagues still describe him as an extremely likeable, almost lovable man, but he was not very easy. His mind moved very quickly, he had times when he was rather depressed, and there was times when it was just as well to get out of his way. So I think the Turing story offers us all an important lesson. And that's really that science and mathematics cannot be separated from the rest of our world. Science is an important influence on our history, on our culture, and culture informs the science that we undertake as well. So Turing has had such an important influence on our world today as he used ideas to understand himself and to understand other people, often questioning the world from very different first principles, looking at the nature of mind and the structure of growth, but he always had a fundamental belief in scientific truth and the importance of scientific truth. I believe that we too can reach new understandings by embracing new needs between different subject areas in the same way that Turing brought together such apparently diverse areas like machine processing and intelligence, cryptanalysis, and biology. And just as Turing questioned the world around him and brought influences from his personal life into his mathematical thinking, so we should all aim to question our life experiences and to grow and develop by always questioning our world around us. So I'd like to finish by inviting you all to the Science Museum and the Alan Turing exhibition there. It's opened until July 2013, and you'll be able to see many of the important and unique historical artifacts that I've talked about today within the exhibition. I also have a small number of leaflets if anybody is interested in the exhibition and some of the ideas within it. There is a booklet that accompanies it, and I've bought a small number today, so do help yourself to one. I'd also like to take a minute just to tell you about our new galleries that we're working on. One of the most biggest of my next projects is a new gallery called Making of Modern Communications. And this looks at the beginning of the electric telegraph, showing how we're not really the first generation to experience such rapid change from new devices such as iPhones and mobile phones, but actually that many of our predecessors experienced this feeling of change in new social structures from new technologies that happened in the 19th century. As part of this gallery, we're going to be showing over 1,000 objects, and we'll have some very cutting-edge interactivity that will go with those. One of the objects that we'll be showing is a Besson 6 Russian supercomputer from 1967, and it was actually used at the Institute of Informatic Systems in Lomonosov in Russia, and we're very lucky to have that object in our collections. In this slide, you can probably see on the top right-hand side a very large object that looks almost like a spider's web. This is a 6-metre-high object that is called the rugby tuning pod, and it was used for sending very low-frequency, very high-energy messages to submarines all over the world during the Cold War. And it also was used to send messages, send out the time, the world's clock time. So it's a very interesting object, but for us we want to show it because it allows people to think that actually communication devices aren't always familiar to us. We may all have a mobile phone, a computer, a telephone, but something like this allows us to look at the electromagnetic spectrum and invite visitors to question how come you can send messages through water, under the sea, to places so remote. We're also working on a Russian space exhibition, and this will also be in 2014. And it will tell the story of Russia and the land and its peoples. It will be the leading exhibition in London during the proposed British Year of Culture in 2014. And we're very grateful to the support of our respective Russian partners, including the Russian Federal Space Agency, Cosmos, and Moscow State Memorial Museum of Cosmonautics, and the Polytechnical Museum. On the British side, we'd also like to thank the Science and Innovation section of the British Embassy in Moscow and the British Council in Moscow and London for their strong support in helping us both research and deliver this exhibition. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you. I hope that you have learned some new things about Alan Turing and the range of his influences across all of those diverse areas of computer science, artificial intelligence, morphogenesis, and also cryptography, which many of you are probably familiar with already. If you have any questions, we still have 5 minutes, so if you have any questions, please do ask me them and I will attempt to answer them.